Hey, listeners, and welcome to the You Are Epic podcast. This is where we honour the people who've helped build not just our industry, but our communities. I'm Angela Hucker, and I am so glad that you're here. So, I'm taking the time to sit down with people who've been in construction for years, people who've been through the ups, the downs, and everything in between. You're going to hear real stories of resilience, growth, and moments that shaped who they are. This podcast is for those that want to learn more from people who've been walking this path for some time, and they're helping to lift up others and quietly making a difference along the way. It's also to show you that your journey matters and your voice matters. And in case you've forgotten, you are epic. Let's get into it. Today's guest is Faye Allen, an absolute powerhouse in the construction industry with extensive experience and a reputation for tackling some of the sector's most complex disputes. She's a regional director at Rimkers and a chartered quantity surveyor, known for her expertise in quantum analysis and expert witness work across high value, high profile cases, both in the UK and internationally. From residential builds to oil and gas projects, Faye has seen it all. Her sharp legal insight, combined with deep commercial experience, makes her a trusted voice in dispute resolution. She's also a published author of the book called Building Women. So, Faye, thank you. It's so awesome to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. So, one thing I always love to find out from my guests, because I'm really curious, how on earth did you get started in this industry?
I always blame my dad. He is an estimator in the industry. When I couldn't really decide what I wanted to do, he was taking me out on some of the jobs with him. And he took me to an old manor house that was supposedly used by Henry the Eighth when he was traveling around the country. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
sent out with drawings and a tape measure and told to sort of measure the walls in various places. And I sort of saw the plans and I was like, actually, this is quite cool. And I started a training contract shortly after, doing 4 days a week working and 1 day doing study. It just got the bug then.
Yes, and you've been in the industry quite some time, I understand.
Yeah, I was. It's 31 years officially, but I think because we did a lot with my dad as kids as well,
Mm.
I pretty much sort of feel like I've been in the industry most of my life, to be honest.
Your whole life, yeah. And so, for your journey, from where you started to, being out there with a measuring tape with your dad to where you are now, what has that kind of looked like for you? Because, from what I understand, none of these journeys are actually linear.
No, no. I mean, I've worked for a number of large contractors, I talk about the sort of the first leaving point I had, which was in my early 20s, and that was when I found out a colleague was earning 10 grand more than I was. And when I asked about it, I was told, well, what do you want me to do about it? And I was like, well, how about pay us the same? And when he just went, well, that's not going to happen, I just put my resignation down. So I've moved company a fair few times, particularly earlier in my career, to get promotions or pay rise because it was always a bit of a tough fight.
Mm.
And then I found a company, they were called Waits, first female boss, absolutely amazing role model, really supportive. She helped me get my law degree, helped me get chartered with the RICS. And it was just like really, really all of that support for just having the interests that I liked, supported by the company and by her. And then I think I moved a few more times, went into aviation and rail for a while. And then I just thought, actually, I really like the legal side. And sort of 10 years ago, walked into the expert witness world. And it's really, you do live jobs periodically as well, but a lot of it is really trying to deal with the problems that other people have. So whether you're trying to resolve the dispute or involved in adjudication or arbitration or litigation, it's varied and fun, which is what I like, because I just found sometimes when you're on site, you can be on site for like a couple of years on a big job and longer on some of them. And I just, needed the variety, I suppose.
And so, moving into that, quantum analysis and the expert witness, like, how has that kind of, like, how did you actually get exposed to that part to know that that was even possible?
I saw a guy, I interviewed with a guy, and he just said it's basically everything you do in your day job, just in a different way, and you put it in a report. And I just thought, okay, then. And I admit, when I joined, I think the first couple of days, I was even on my phone to my dad going, Daddy, what have I done? What have I done? I felt sick walking into the office because the consulting environment is so different to the contracting environment. And I felt like a bit of a fish out of water. But then after about probably 3 to 6 months, I sort of found my groove, I suppose. But it really is exactly the same stuff. You're looking at, drawings and variations and pricing things up. It's just not on particularly a live job all the time. It's
Mm,
obviously, or it can be, and it will be one where the parties are arguing and you're basically going to say what you think the quantum should be based on the sort of years of experience that you have. So he was right, the guy that interviewed me. It's the same stuff, just in a slightly different way. And they send you on training courses to help you learn how to write CPR 35 compliant reports. And obviously, when I gave evidence in the technology and construction court, I had some training on, just getting you used to being in the box and the sort of questions you might get asked and how to respond to them. So, yeah, it's all been quite interesting. Bit of a baptism of fire the first time you give evidence, but yeah, I do enjoy it.
and is there a is obviously not breaching confidentiality, of course, but is there a kind of one that sort of sticks out in your mind for you?
Yeah, probably one of the ones that, and it is one that I did give evidence on. It was a really difficult case, and I think what I find sometimes with dispute work is the parties can get quite entrenched in their positions, and that can make it quite difficult for everybody involved.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, that one probably is the one that sticks out the most, just because the characters involved were all quite interesting. That we had a really good legal team. The KC was amazing, and I think, although they didn't do as well out of it as they'd have liked, I think they got probably the best that they could have got in that situation. And I think
mm,
with dispute work, sometimes that's what you have to say to people. It's not always black and white. There's all these shades of grey, and you
mm,
can never guarantee the outcome. And I think that's what the legal teams always have to sort of say to the various clients. And I can do the best I can with what I'm doing, but you just never know what the decision maker will do.
mm. And it's a very emotional space as well, because obviously you're talking about money, and like people that if you're the contractor, you've done the work, for example, like you want to get paid the money, but then if you're the person at the other end, and it's like, well, have they actually done everything they're meant to? Do I actually want to fork out this money? And there's a lot of emotion, like it can be quite charged as well.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because when I moved into dispute work, I'd actually not really had any disputes on any of the jobs I ever worked on, and I think
Okay.
it's just probably the way that I ran them. It would be like if there was a problem, I'd want to try and nip it in the bud as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you look at things like people go, oh, the contract should be in the bottom drawer. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't. It should be on the desk or on your computer all the time because it's there to protect both parties and it is okay to use it. And I think that's kind of the thing that people forget sometimes when they get in trouble, particularly with contracts like NEC, for example. There's really specific timescales where you have to do things. And that's where people often let themselves down because they're just not complying with the contract. So I always say the contract's there to protect you, so don't be afraid to use it.
Yeah. And that, what you've said, like about the contract sitting in a drawer like that, is something that happens quite a lot here in Australia as
Yeah,
well. People think, oh, well, we can just put it in the drawer and it's only when we need it that we'll pull it out and go, oh, well, you need to do this and that. But it is
yeah.
actually there to actually protect everyone. So,
Yeah, and I think there can be some habits with people when they put contracts together of lobbing everything in there, including the kitchen sink, and not checking. And then that's another one that I see quite a lot where you've got conflict in the contract documents. And, you can have like these big companies and they'll have like thousands and thousands of standards and stuff on their system. And they'll just put like a link. And it's like, how can you possibly expect the supply chain to be able to pick every single thing up? And I just think, it's sometimes it will take longer to put a contract together properly and make sure that it's actually got the right information in it. But I think we're so sort of time bare in construction, often the thought is let's just chuck everything in and it will protect us. And often that's what bites people later on.
Absolutely. And that's where you come in then, so to sort it all out.
Yeah, and have the fun of going through the thousands of documents.
I know. Which is, I wouldn't call it fun, but anyway. Now, what I'd love to talk to you about, you touched on like you've been in the industry 31 years and, the different stuff that you do is something that's not really well acknowledged or spoken about. It's something that really sits behind the scenes within the industry as well. Like it's a very unspoken role that a lot of people aren't aware of. And particularly when we think about, the next generation coming in and there's a lot of focus to get more women into the industry and women traditionally the way that the industry is being pitched is that it's you be a tradesperson, you're on the tools, but they actually don't realize all of this stuff of what there is behind the scenes and the ecosystem. And, like you're a beautiful example of, someone who's been in the industry so long and the different roles that you've been able to do and help support. But I understand as well, like with your book about building women, like I'd love to touch on what actually drove you to do that and what have you uncovered as a result of the research that you've undertaken as part of that book.
Oh, where do I start? So it morphed as an idea. I mean, one of the things that I've always done is I've done STEM work, so I like to go into schools and universities, and I like to encourage the next generation in. And I think some of it was I was going in there and I was thinking, how can I keep bringing these young people in when actually I know the culture can be quite toxic?
Mm,
And I was talking to more and more women and hearing that they were having some of the same issues that I'd had in my early career and later career. I mean, it's never perfect, but
mm,
particularly in my early career. And I think hashtag Me Too happened, and that kind of blew up in my face a bit because I admitted that I'd been a victim of a sexual assault by somebody at work and I'd never told anybody. And
mm,
then I was talking at London Build in 2020, and that was like the final straw. I was speaking to a woman of colour who was also a mother and listening to like the triple whammy of issues that she was having. And I just thought something's got to change. So
mm,
I went on a book course with a lady called Lucy McCarahurst, who sort of thinks everyone's got a book inside them. And I told her my crazy idea, and she was like, "This is not like anything we've ever done before." But she was like, "It sounds really good. I'm really passionate about it." She was like, "Let's do it." And had a book coach who helped me get what was in my head into a plan. And then I started the research because for me it was about trying to measure what the issues were, had it improved since I'd started.
mm,
So, like, a lot of the questions are, has this happened? And if it did happen, did it happen in the last year, 5 years, 10 years, or longer? Because I was trying to see whether there was a trend, whether things had improved.
mm,
And unfortunately, 3 in 10 of the women that I surveyed did say that they'd been sexually assaulted, for example, and 16% of them it had happened in the last year. So I was like, okay, so this is still happening. And like bullying and discrimination, they were in the sort of high 60s percentage, so we know that women don't get treated particularly well, particularly in site situations. And I was like, we've got to do something about it. So I started the research on that, started speaking to women, but then I started to realize that actually men have got issues as well because the suicide statistics in the UK, we lose men so often in the industry, and that is obviously a culture problem as well. So I think it's 4 times the national average, nearly, our suicide rates. And I know that that's not dissimilar in other countries because people
mm,
from Australia, Canada, US, had some from the Middle East all answered the survey, and they do have issues as well. But I just thought, how can I get men online with this? Because things won't change unless men get involved. And that's where I sort of started looking at the allyship side of things. What can men do? But also, what are the barriers to them doing it? Because there is this macho culture in construction. There is this banter that people hear about all the time. And it can be really tough. Let's face it, people work in all weathers. They're often away from home.
mm,
There can be a drink and drugs culture. I've spoken about that in the past in some of the construction press. And I think it's like a melting pot. So I was like, not only do I need to get men involved, but I need them to see how their involvement will improve things for them as well. And that's really what a large section of the book is about, trying to get rid of the fear barrier that some men have of being an ally, making them realize that, I mean, every woman I've spoken to is like, do you know what? I will have no problem with a man trying to do something if they've got the right intention.
Mm.
And I always say to men, I know 99.9% of men aren't bad. They just don't know what they don't know. And I think education is probably what the key is. So I've spent another couple of years of the 4 years of research speaking to various men, trying to work out what would be good, how we can get them on board, and giving them examples of what they can do. And it can be really simple, like, you know, when you're hearing a woman constantly being spoken over in a meeting, just stopping them and going, hold on a minute, Faye's got a really good idea there, let's let her finish what she was saying. And I think for me that was really important, because when I've spoken to men, they just didn't know what to do exactly, and they don't want to be aggressive or start a row.
Mm.
But if you give them some really easy opportunities and examples, that starts them on that journey. And once people start to realize what's going on, they can't unsee these things. So every man who's read the book so far has come back and gone, oh my God, I did not realize how often this happens. And they are actually now a big part of making that change happen. And it's touching people in the legal arena, because obviously of the expert work I do. My partner works in security, so it's touching that side because he's seen all the stuff I've done, and security is another quite sort of heavily populated male industry. And it's really, how can we all work together to make it better for everyone? And I do genuinely think that's the only way it will happen, because I think there's been so much polarization of the genders against each other that actually has created more toxic culture. So like men think, you know, oh, you know, women get in just because they're women and someone's trying to fill a quota. Oh, I'm losing out because she's getting the job. And actually, when you look at the research, it shows actually the more women you have, the better the culture becomes, the more money you get, the happier people are. When you start to sort of sell that to men and make them realize actually it will make things better for them and give them more opportunities,
Mm.
that's how you change their sort of decision and culture. And that's where hopefully the whole industry will improve.
That's remarkable. And, like I understand it was a 4-year project for you, which is no small undertaking by any means.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
it's been a bit of a killer.
on top of working as well. So, and
Yeah,
then,
yeah, it's a lot of evenings, weekends, and all my annual leave, basically. But I think it's such an important thing that I think the industry can be so good, but it can also be so toxic. And you know, we've got skills shortages here. Everyone talks about it. We've got a government who says they want to build all these new homes, but we haven't got enough people to do it. And yet there are young people coming out, and women as well, who want to be in the trades and they want to learn. So we have to make that culture on site safe for them, because otherwise they'll do what everyone else does. They'll come in and then we'll have that leaky pipeline where they drop out again.
so as a result of your 4 years research and talking to over 300 people, I believe.
Right, it's 1,000 women all in, and
1,000.
probably about 500 or 600 men.
Wow, that's incredible. And that they're from all around the world. So
Yeah.
you've got a very diverse perspective from, all different angles and all different countries. Was there a common theme that you kind of found as far as like with the culture? Like you touched on a few of those things with, like the drugs and the alcohol and things like that. But was there a common theme that you found across interviewing all those people, why the culture is so unhealthy for people?
I think it's the real. It goes back to how it was always quite a macho
Mm.
industry when you look at it, and I think we do still have some of the old guard in who have unfortunately taught younger people the same behaviours, and I think so that is definitely an issue. I think there's a big problem with people being able to talk in the industry because of that. And I think that directly correlates to leading towards mental health being such a problem, because it really is a massive problem.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of people trying to do things about that. Like there was a campaign in the UK called The Lost City, and they were showing the amount of construction workers that had died in the last sort of 10 years. They could have built an entire city. And I think it's, you know, that macho bravado, banter, you know, things that used to be okay really aren't okay for a start. They do have to
Mm.
stop. But
Mm.
also people not being able to talk, people not being treated well enough. So, you know, when we talk about inclusivity for women, when they've got PPE that doesn't fit them properly, or there's no toilet on the site. How are you ever going to have people feeling included if they
Mm.
can't even go to the loo and they can't wear anything? I mean, I used to trip up over my own feet all the time because my boots were too heavy, or I get caught on scaffolding because my high vis was too big. It's only literally last week that the new British standards come in about PPE and making sure that it does fit properly and it is personal to the person. And that's the whole thing we've forgotten, I think, over the years. So
Mm.
I think there's a combination of, we've got long hours, we've got a culture that isn't inclusive. I think I mentioned contracts earlier. I think there's poor payment practices that unfortunately go all the way down the supply chain. So you can have the best big contractor doing all these wonderful things, but then you've got most of the industry being made up of small and medium enterprises. So how do we
Mm.
make sure the culture flows through everyone? And a lot of that is respect, and I don't think we respect the supply chain, and I talk about that quite a lot in the book as well. We don't
Mm.
treat them well, we squeeze the program, we don't pay people on time, we put people under inordinate pressure, and then wonder why we've got mental health problems in the industry and why the culture is so toxic, and why people won't go and do half a day's training that could really help them as a person or give them support, because they can't pay the bills if they aren't on site for half a day.
Mm.
So it's a mix, I think, of a few issues, but they are not unsolvable. I think it's just that it's been swept under the carpet for so many ye's, and that's kind of where I came at with the book. I was like, it's time we blew the lid off it and
Mm.
actually deal with it.
Absolutely. And I think it's such valuable insights because it's actually you're hearing it direct from the people about what it is they're facing, and you're getting those statistics, you're getting the data, you're understanding that. So with the industry moving forward, like now that you've got all this valuable research and data, what would you like to see for the industry moving forward?
I mean, what I'm hoping, I suppose, from my perspective, is that it's creating the ripple that creates the wave. I think the first impact has to be industry waking up and listening to what's actually happening. And I think, for years, women have been silenced with NDAs and compromise agreements. I was even put on one in my career. And, luckily, the law hopefully is changing in the UK against that. So by 2027, that won't be allowed to happen anymore. I think, we need to respect the people in the industry because it's a people industry. That's what people seem to forget. Construction wouldn't happen without the people, and actually, we don't respect them. And it really is that simple. If everybody was respected, the whole industry would change. So it's really trying to create that ripple of truth, I suppose, through the industry so that people realise that actually we can't just keep sweeping this under the carpet anymore.
Mm.
We cannot keep losing women out of the leaky pipeline, because I think the ONS stats in the UK, we've never got over 15.84% in like 25 years, ever. In fact, it's gone down again this last couple of months. So you see it goes up a bit, then it goes down, then it goes up a bit, then it goes down. So we get all these young people in, and then the people later on, they're usually around for women between the ages of 45 and 47, according to our ICS research. They drop out. And when I've spoken to women, it's just because they're exhausted. It's not because, they've had a family in their 30s or whatever, which is when you think they might drop out. They're just tired of the constant fight. So for me, it's like, how do we make the industry so it's not that hard? We need to introduce flexible working. It does work on site. It's been proven. There's been companies who have proven it. You can even do 4-day weeks. You can do working on productivity rather than expecting people to be there between 7 and 6. Split shifts for crane drivers, for example, would
Mm.
help with musculoskeletal disorders. There's so many things we could do to make the industry better and more inclusive. And some of it, I think, off-site fabrication. I was talking a bit about this last week at an expo. That also allows more flexibility and shift patterning, which can help people be
Mm.
able to do drop off for school, but also not expecting that to only be done by women. I think men need to be able to be part of that parenting duo properly where they want that opportunity. And at the moment, you still see when men do that, they get quite a lot of stick. And it's like, I think we just have to make the culture change so that we make it better for everyone. And that if men want to be involved more, that they can be. And,
Mm.
women don't have the constant gender pay gap that people forget. It's not just about now when you're at work, it's also about your pension later on. So women are always behind. We've got to make it so that they can actually catch up, and so that no one's losing out on their career if they want one.
And so, and they're great insights. What about from a government perspective? Because obviously, government, a lot of projects have government backing and stuff as well. And governments are the ones enforcing the legislation and policies and things like that. So, unless there's like a mandate and some consistency being driven from the government level down, it does make it very hard because then you just get this bit of a haphazard approach that everyone just kind of does what they think. But what would you like to see government actually doing in that regards?
Well, a good start would be actually understanding the industry, wouldn't it? Um,
Well, yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
I mean, I think that's half the problem. They talk about the skills shortage and they say we're going to throw a load of money at it and we're going to build this many homes in the next 5 years, but they actually don't have a clue what the problems are. And that is half the problem. They're not actually speaking to people on the ground. They're not actually learning what the issues are. And I don't know if it's the same in every country, but I definitely know that's the problem here. And that's why I don't think we ever see a significant change. So, I mean, I did ask the construction minister, for example, to come to my book launch. Yeah, surprise, surprise, didn't get anyone come. But I do think there is work to be done to get government to actually understand the issues people are facing, because I think what happens is you get a lot of people in their ivory tower who don't know what's going on the ground. And I think that is the main problem. So you can say you want us to build 3 million new homes as much as you like. We've never managed to build over, I think it was like 185,000 in a year, and now you want us to do 300,000 with less people in the workforce and less skills available. They are deluded. That's half of the problem. So I think a good place for the governments to start would be actually understanding the construction industry itself and the built environment as a whole, because it is a massive industry, not just the actual building part of it, but the design and everything else. And yes, they can put in the money for these mega projects, but they're going to have no one to build them if they don't start working harder to help us with the culture. So,
Mm.
yeah, I'm a bit scathing, I'm afraid. I just think there's a lot of people who don't understand in government, and they need to get on the ground and actually listen to what's going on.
No, I'm with you because the issues are similar here in Australia. There's a lot of stuff happening here, and it's not necessarily engaging with those who've got the lived experience, who've been in the industry a long time. They'll engage with certain people, but those people aren't necessarily have come from the industry. They might have come from more of an academic background, but may not have necessarily even worked on a construction site to understand the day-to-day complexities as well. So it makes it quite challenging to say, well, how can you make an industry better unless you actually understand what the industry is made up of?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, there are things they can do which don't just affect the industry, sort of maternity provisions, for example, paternity,
Mm,
if they made more effort to equalize things, and flexibility, we do have a right to ask for flexibility, but actually in construction it can be quite difficult to get that. And I think that's part of the reason with the stats and stuff in the book. I really wanted to cover those companies that have done it and done it successfully and proven it works, and it doesn't affect program, it doesn't affect your profit. In fact, profit goes up, people are happier, so that others can see actually this can work. And I think, if we do that, there are lots of young people who do have an interest in the industry. But when I do careers talks, a lot of people don't actually know the wide variety of careers that we can
yes.
have. And they
Yeah.
often don't realize how well it can be paid either. And when kids hear that, they're like, ears prick up and they're like, oh, actually, this could be an industry that could be good for me.
Mm,
And, I just want to make it so that the culture's better for them. I think KPIs would be a big one for me with supply chain, and that's not necessarily from government, but I spoke to the Considerate Constructors scheme about this. I think we measure like large contractors based on, they get platinum, gold, silver status and what have you, but the rest of the industry is SMEs. So we need a way of like anonymously measuring culture on site, I think. And then if there's a problem on site, you can then start to work with it. But at the moment, no one really measures that. So we don't really know what's going on. There's like
mm,
contractors who are doing really well and they're great and they're working really hard, and everyone that works for them has got a great culture. But then you go onto the actual site itself and you can have
mm,
50 different companies on there, all with their own different cultures.
mm.
Some of them who will think, one behaviour is okay, and others that think it isn't. And then we throw young people into it. And, they haven't really got a chance unless they're in a company that has got a good culture, but they're still going to get a hard time on some sites, unfortunately.
Mm. Yeah, and that's where it's quite hard because especially like on bigger projects and you've got so many different contractors and different things and happening together and unless there's a consistency that this is like a project culture that everyone has to abide by. Appreciate each company has their own thing, but there needs to be that standard that's set as a minimum for projects by
Yeah.
projects as
And
well.
I think, we talk about sort of toolbox talks and inductions, and I really think culture needs to be a big part of it. I think from my perspective, rather than just covering health and safety and, trips and falls and what have you, this should be a big part of it. And I think, we should be making sure that we offer supply chain training, even if it's, half a day each month. Don't worry that everyone's not working for that half a day. Let's get everybody on board and get everybody included in some training that they can't necessarily afford. Because when you've got your self-employed trowel on site doing the bricklaying, he
Mm,
can't afford to take half a day off. He's got a mortgage to pay. So
mm,
let's support the whole industry and educate the whole industry, and then that will change the industry. That's what I
mm.
think.
No, I love it. And that's, I'm on the same page and I agree wholeheartedly with that. Now, you sort of just briefly mentioned about how, as part of doing your research with the book, like you found some companies who were doing some really great things. So, what are some of those things that they're actually doing? Because it would be valuable to learn from people who are doing great as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, some of them are about shift patterns. So, and offering job shares, for example. So that works really well. Some of them trialed productivity working, and I think that, I mean, if you give someone a productivity rate, you'll be amazed how quick they'll get it done and go. So that can work really, really well. I think there's been trials with flexibility on site because that seems to be one of the ones that people seem to trip up over and they have an issue with. Oh, we can't be flexible on site. Everyone needs to be there from sort of 7 till 6. Actually, that was proven to work as well. So and even 4 day weeks have been proven to work. So I think the thing is we've got this really old aged sort of thought process in construction, and actually companies that have tried something new have actually proven it does work, and many of them have stuck with it as well, and that has then had the benefit of bringing more people in. So they're actually bringing more diverse people in, they're improving the statistics of young people they have working there, and they're plugging the leap and retaining the staff they've already got. So
mm,
there is a section in the book about the sort of things that companies can do, and I think it's really important that we do learn from people who've actually proven it works.
absolutely. Because, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. If someone's actually doing something, they've proven it, they've tested it, they've proven it,
Yeah,
it's working. Like just adopt the same things because
yeah.
someone's already trialed and errored it. So yeah.
So, I mean, I think we can all make a difference, but I think the problem we have is because the industry is fragmented, we need the people up here to really help disseminate it through the whole supply chain.
And so when you say the people up here, who are you thinking of specifically?
I think it's a double whammy. You've got to get clients on board for a start, thinking about best value rather than cheapest price, because that actually will make a big difference, because then you're not squeezing the entire sort of stream of people. Because I think when people think of cheapest value first, you aren't getting best value, and you're squeezing program and money so much that every single contract that gets placed, because the client will place the contract with the contractor, remember, and then they will place all the contracts with the people that are going to do the work. So it
Mm,
will just get squeezed all the way down the line because no one's getting a profit. So
mm,
I think one of the first things that we need to do is be realistic. It's an industry that's full of businesses, and businesses are entitled to make a profit. So let's look at, first of all, what's best value, what's the right price, what is the right program. So from clients and contractors' perspective, and also not chucking everything, including the kitchen sink, into the contract. I'm quite passionate about that because obviously I
yeah.
see things go horribly wrong now.
Yeah.
But also when it comes to supply chain, treating them fairly as well, contracting with them fairly, but also paying them on time, not putting them under pressure with programs, just making sure everything's realistic, because a job will actually finish faster if it's been put together right in the first place. It's the jobs that have I mean, I remember I had one with a contractor, and I won't say who it was, but I was told I had to break even on a job. They'd taken the job at a loss. So before you've even started, you're already thinking, God, how am I going to get this job to break even? Which
Mm,
means you're automatically having to squeeze everything as tight as you can all the time. That is
mm.
not a healthy industry.
No, definitely not. And you're already starting on the back foot.
Yeah. And it's a lot of pressure. So it's pressure for the contractor that's taken the work on, and they've done that probably to get the turnover, which I do understand. But equally, you then put pressure on your entire supply chain because you're trying to squeeze them because you're trying to make the profit or get yourself back to break even.
Mm,
And it's not a sustainable way to work.
no.
I mean, I think the other thing that probably would work really well, and it would work particularly with homes and sort of offices and hotels and stuff, is really the offsite manufacture. There's some brilliant examples of how well that works. It allows people to do shift patterns, which just enables people to have their life that they want and work. If we want people to be involved in the industry, we need to think a little bit differently. And I
Mm,
think, there's a lot of off-site sort of fabrication techniques and what have you. We've got a lot coming on with sort of data and AI. There's so many things that can help,
mm.
but we've just got to embrace it as an industry. And we're traditionally not very good at doing that.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about it, like construction is nothing but change management on a daily, hourly basis. But yet, when it comes to things that actually help make the industry better, there's a huge amount of resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's really weird, isn't it? Because it doesn't make sense. I've done some really
No.
good jobs with off-site manufacture, and I think, why are we not doing more of this? I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, some do go wrong, nothing's perfect, but the actual the job itself, you can really keep an eye on quality. You can give that flexibility. And, provided you don't get a ton of changes in the middle of the manufacturing process, because that's something that can really, really cause a problem, you will get things generally happen on time, and
Mm,
then it's so much faster to put it together on site. It's just like that whole thing of trying to embrace things that are a bit different seems to be something that we're not very good at in the
mm.
industry.
And that's the part that I just am constantly astounded by because, the whole industry has just changed continually, especially when you're on site and, you might have some weather issues or deliveries are late or people calling in sick or whatever, and you're constantly changing that schedule to adapt accordingly as well. So yeah, it astounds me. So when you think back on your career that you've had, the past 31 years, and appreciate like you've just had a significant, massive, proud moment with, being able to get your book launched and released as well. But when you think back on your career, have you got another standout moment for you that you're really proud of?
Um, I think I think moving from just doing sort of like this quantity surveying on site to the expert work was a big step, but it's one that I'm quite proud of. It was scary because it was going from a contracting environment into a consulting environment, and I definitely was a bit of a fish out of water for a while. Um, but I really, really enjoy it, and I'm really proud that I've done that, and I've done, you know, expert courses since, and I've become an accredited expert with the RICS and with the Academy of Experts. And it's something that I really enjoy and I'm very passionate about. And not just necessarily working on the disputes, but also just because I think the industry, it's never going to not have disputes. So I feel like, it's not like I'm ever going to do myself out of the job, but sometimes helping people to mitigate and avoid the dispute in the first place is really nice as well. You do get people come to you with a live problem and they're like, I don't know what to do. And sometimes just having a fresh set of eyes looking at it, can
Mm,
really make a difference. So yeah, I've really enjoyed getting into that side of the industry. And I think it's the variety for me.
yeah,
Construction is always different, but I got to a point where I was like, okay, it's as a surveyor, it's another new job, then it's placing all the contracts, then it's paying everyone. So it was a bit samey each time, even if the job was
yeah.
a different build. So with this, I like the variety. So I'm sort of proud that I did sort of take the step to move.
And it would be, like no two disputes would be the same because there's just different complexities, different things, different contracts, different
Yeah.
people. And yeah, it would be quite an interesting space to be in, no doubt. So,
Yeah, I mean, we do see a lot more, particularly since Grenfell. There's a lot of cladding issues. Obviously, I think that's
Mm,
obviously a worldwide issue. So we do see a lot of those, and they're quite difficult to deal with because obviously everyone's struggling with that because the sort of time period has gone back now. So you're looking at so many different buildings,
mm.
going back for like 30 years. But yeah, I mean, even they're a bit different each time. Nothing's ever the same because there aren't really any buildings that are all the same, are there?
No, no, that's exactly right. I agree. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, Faye. That's incredible. What I'd love to ask you in closing is that if you had some words of wisdom that you could help pass on, and it could just be, I always frame it that if there was someone standing in front of you and there was something that you would just love to tell them, and whether that's something about the industry, about, being a good person or the opportunities that are available, whatever it might be, what would Faye's words of wisdom be that it could help someone?
I think it's something that I think has come from sort of the way I was brought up, but I think it's really just treating everyone with respect. It's such a simple thing, but it's something that many people forget. No one is better than you. And I sort of spoke about this recently on a podcast. I will speak to anybody, no matter where they are, and they will all be treated with respect. And I think that's what people deserve. No one's better than anyone else. And actually, if you start treating people that way, you get so much back.
Mm, I love that. And it is a big missing part in this industry, unfortunately, is that respect
Yeah,
element.
there's a lot of sort of shouty, a lot of pressure, but actually, you get much more out of people when you respect them and treat them well.
Yeah, well, there's a saying that you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for all the incredible work you're doing, and that 4 years of mammoth effort to, talk to that 1,500, 1,600 people that you've spoken to and get that valuable insights. And, my request is that for people to actually buy this book and really understand what's going on. It's not just a UK perspective, it's a global perspective. The issues are happening worldwide. It's not just isolated to one country, and the insights that you've got are valuable insights that can help shift this industry and make it better moving forward. So thank you for everything you're doing for the industry in so many different ways, and being the selfless person that you are to help make this industry better. And thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I hope this conversation gave you something that you can take with you, whether it be a little bit of insight, inspiration, or maybe just a reminder that you're not alone. If it resonated with you, please share, because we're better when we help build each other up. And remember that your experience, your story, and your journey, it all matters more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay connected, and never forget, you are epic.